Righty bitey, welcome back. For today, I decided to kind of explain how you might want to get jobs and how to apply for them because I don't feel like we are taught how, for instance, to write a very compelling CV and how to write compelling cover letters, which I don't think is that important, but that's just my opinion. But CVs are very important, and specifically how you frame what you did. So that's what I decided to talk about. I feel like I might want to share some tips just because I'm currently employed as a working student um, in my first year of university. It is very helpful if you have a job. I feel like it's kind of like a nice balance between work and studies, and besides, you actually learn something that you might want to use maybe for another company, for private projects. So it is, in my opinion, a pretty good way to build experience, specifically if you're in university, because as we know, Gen Z is not going into jobs with just a degree. Like people expect you to work. Um, and so I decided maybe let's make that happen so that more, of my generation can actually work with impactful companies or startups. As a disclaimer, I did a lot of the things that are on my CV because originally I wanted to apply to American colleges, which I did, and I had pretty good options. No Ivy League though, but pretty good options in California. But because it's still quite expensive, even with scholarships, I decided to not go. Um, that's why we didn't end up there. But just keep that in mind because I did that mostly because I knew admission committees were looking for ECs. So let's start, preferably with the structure of a CV. I did redact some things out, so that's why it might look ugly, but all in all, when I first applied to Munich-based startups, I think I sent out 30 applications, 40 at most, and most with like the LinkedIn apply. And I landed 4 job interviews. And I decided to, just do one because the other ones wanted me to work full time, which doesn't work. So, I decided to filter out job applications. That's a side note. Anyways, so this is essentially how my CV looks. I know the light is annoying, but overall, what is important is that the structure actually applies. So the structure of this CV is called Harvard structure or Harvard style. And essentially, what you're trying to do is to put everything very important on one side of a CV so that HR can skim through your CV because on average they spend less than 10 seconds on your CV. Keep that in mind. So, how do you write that CV? First things, I just learned recently that having an objective line, which is that one, is pretty helpful in terms of tricking AI to bring your application forward. Because AI or large language models, they're screening your CVs now. So if you have an objective, which is 3 sentences at max long, where explain what your skills are, what you want to bring to the company, and then explain why you want to work with the company or startup. That helps filter out people who essentially read the job description and people who did not. So I do recommend that. And objective is not that long, right? Like even if you see it for me, it's like 2 sentences long at max. So include that. Second thing that you include after objective is work experience. I got that tip from a YC CEO who told me that if you include education before your experience, HR might be reluctant to, invite you to job interviews, specifically if they notice that you're quite young and that you might be in your first or second year in university. So do the following. Just include your work experience after objective. And then I listed out quite a lot. Um, which kind of helps me in a way because all these skills, they help me gain some interest at startups because that's why, or like where I primarily try to apply. Um, I think to mention the following is quite important. You should know where you want to apply because this CV with all the activities and all the things that I did might not work well for bigger corporations, but it might work well for startups because they're essentially looking for someone who might be doing a lot of things and who did a lot of things and learn from them. For corporations, that's not necessarily the case. So just keep that in mind. Now, as you list essentially your activities, I don't know why I redacted these because if you go on my LinkedIn, you'll see it. Anyways, after you write them down, you have at most 2 to 3 key points that you list and that you can quantify. So a lot of HR folks want to see that you had some impact. If you're quite new in the role, obviously you cannot quantify your impact, but it is important that you have at least some numbers. Now, if you're currently working, you should be keeping notes on what you're doing, because at the end you can analyze what you did, how to quantify that, and what skills to present. So that's also important because chances are you might not remember everything that you did. Next thing, after essentially work experience, education comes. By the way, I switch high schools a lot, so that's why I have a huge chunk for education. Point is, you just write down where you went to school and your year. That's it. And that's kind of optional if it fits skills. So if the skills weren't like really, uh, how to say that, obvious in here, you might want to add them here. Um, or even certifications that you did that were not necessarily related with any of your work experiences. Just name them, drop them, but overall keep in mind that the skills section should not lead to your CV having a second page. So that's it essentially. Point is, I only learned writing a CV because I had people in HR and at C-levels telling me what to look for. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known that. So yeah. I mean, I'm thinking if there's something else to explain. I think not really. Um, well, no, there's one more thing. So a lot of folks, HR founders, they check your LinkedIn. So if you do not have a LinkedIn, I would say that's kind of like a disadvantage at some point because LinkedIn acts as a primary online portfolio for everything that you think, say, and write. So if you were to go to my LinkedIn profile, you'd first see a Ghibli profile picture, which is maybe not that serious. Like it doesn't look serious, but I don't care. Like it didn't affect me negatively yet. And afterwards, you will kind of see an about me section, and then you see links with projects that I did in some way. And what apparently counts nowadays is that you are self-directed. So if you can show that to some extent you are thinking for yourself and doing projects for yourself because you enjoy them, you can very much use that, like these materials in your job interviews. Because, for instance, I remember when I applied to these Munich startups, none of them was doing biotech. So I had to explain to them, well, why them if I want to go to biotech. And I think the easiest way to explain to certain companies and startups why you want to do a certain thing is because you can always say, well, I'd like to learn some skills. And you have evidence that you do like to learn some skills based on your projects. So I feel like if you do things that are not necessarily required of you, but are really fun for you, present them, talk about them. People will notice. So I heard of a case where I think a high schooler built a computer or like reverse engineer it, and there was someone from Neuralink, Neu the company by Elon Musk, um, watching this kid, and they actually offered him an internship. So you don't know what opportunities you have until you start, putting yourself out there. So I think that's it for the CV thing. I might add the draft down below, but it's essentially from Harvard. So you can actually go to the Harvard site. It's called Harvard FAS. Um, it's a career center, and they do have these kind of like templates. Otherwise, people on LinkedIn, they have online CVs. Now, for online CVs, they don't necessarily to be these CVs which are ordered. So for instance, for me, I'm currently building my CV in a Netflix style, which is quite creative, but I feel like that's fun. People are out there building CVs like Tony Stark would. So, for your online CVs, be creative. The more funnier it looks, the better. And that's it. So I hope you were able to take something out of it. Um, for those who are like way more experienced, probably no value, but if you stick around, thank you. Apart from that, if you feel like that's not really accurate, what I was talking about, feel free to either comment or reach out to me via LinkedIn. I try to reply, but that's it. Bye.